my broadcast community. It is MJ Calloway here with your Bounce Up broadcast. It's Thursday, and I am thrilled to have a special guest today, Denise Conroy, as well as our fabulous co-host, Jim Kunkel. Now, a little bit about Denise. She is a CEO and a former CMO. So this is going to be one crazy conversation today. So welcome, both of you.
Thank you. Good to be here.
It's great to be here, MJ.
And Jim and I are from the Pittsburgh area. And Denise, I believe you were formerly, because you have that 412 area code,
Oh,
from
yes.
Pittsburgh.
Oh, yes. I see that backdrop, which is the city of Pittsburgh behind Jim, and I get really like homesick and excited. So really, really cool to actually interact with some Pittsburgh folks.
Welcome home.
Thank you.
Yes, you'll always be a hometown girl.
Always.
Now, where are you located currently?
I am on a 227-year-old farm outside of Boston, about an hour and a half from Boston, in a town called Alton, New Hampshire.
Okay, great. Now, for our audience, please go ahead and put in the comments, where are you tuning in from? We'd love to hear it. So, Denise, you have a pretty awesome background here, and currently you are working with women, specifically women, correct?
Yes, correct.
To get them on the path to get in a C-suite position. Is that correct? Did I get that?
Absolutely. And my reason for being, and I think we should all have one, is to put more women and diverse faces in the C-suite in America. As we all know, I think women have something like, you said it in your Korn Ferry stats that you posted up for this event. We have something like 6% of the CEO roles in the United States, 25% in the C-suite. And when you look at what we buy everything. So to me, that is simply not good enough. And instead of complaining about it, I wanted to reach in and do something about it.
Oh, I love that. Absolutely love it. And it is crazy when we think about it. And that statistic came from Korn Ferry, and they surveyed 1,000 corporations in the US. That is just absolutely insane to only have 6% women in a CEO role. So what do you think is one of the major issues with having more women in the CEO role?
There's two issues. I think one is comfort. So we humans love to be comfortable. I like to liken it to a Snuggie. It's like that blanket you put on and you're nice and warm. And frankly, if you look at the environment of most C-suites, they're filled with men. These men know each other. They're comfortable with each other, right? I don't want to say it's like a locker room, but sometimes it is, right? If you've ever played sports. And there's a comfort issue, and I've had men say to me, well, gosh, if we brought a woman with us to lunch or into the C-suite, we couldn't talk about X, Y, and Z. My comeback's always, you shouldn't be talking about X, Y, and Z anyway at work, right?
Right.
But, the second piece of it, though, is I think a lot of we women, it's a pretty toxic path, right? And it has all kinds of peril on it. So, I don't have children. I'm kind of fortunate in that way. But if you have kids and a family, you get exhausted and you stop fighting the fight. You throw in the towel, literally. So I think it's a combo of those two things.
Which makes sense. And I come from the building construction industry, which is mostly male dominated. So I get that. I get that path. I know some of the struggles that women have. So now, what is it that so there's those two issues there, comfort and then also the struggle, because it is male dominated. I remember walking into a conference once, and I stood at the doorway, and then I just walked outside because I called a friend and I said, oh my goodness, I feel like it is raining men in three-piece suits. And I was like, okay. And we talked for a little bit, and I thought, okay, I'm just going to jump right in. And I was one of three and about 100 people, one of three women with 100, men. So it is, we are going out of our comfort zone. So what is it that you can suggest that women can do?
So I think there are for women, and I'd say this is also important for anybody who doesn't fit the mold. So right now, and this is not, I'm not anti-white guy. A lot of times people will say, you don't like white guys. Absolutely untrue. I grew up in a family of white guys, only girl other than me and my mom. I love dudes a lot. I love working with them as long as we're on the same page, right? In terms of what we believe in value wise. But I do think for anybody who isn't a white guy, how do you break in, right? So I think you got to have three essential traits. Okay. And I call them the 3 C's. The first C is that you have got to be so good at change, and not change in a whiplashy, wishy-washy way. I don't mean that. I mean the ability to adapt, to flex. I like to say converting your best plans, your best ideas, and your best intentions into what is dictated by life and the market and the world of business now, right? The pandemic's a great example of that. You can make all kinds of plans, and like people say, we plan, God laughs. That was the tagline of our pandemic. So I think that's number one. And it was really interesting to me, just to add to that, when I went from being a chief marketing officer at HGTV, which was sort of the pinnacle of my marketing career, to then going out and becoming a CEO, that step up in being flexible and adaptable and open to change from that level, which was already real high, to the next level, the highest level, incredible. Like my first year was a very, very difficult, lonely, arduous year. So that's sort of the number one trait. The second trait is you got to be all about curating the best people. I liken it really. I love the word curate because you're like working at a museum, right? I'm at the Heinz Museum or any great museum, and I'm going to go out and I'm going to figure out where are the best people with the most potential. And that requires a couple things. It requires me to not be intimidated by hiring people that are better than me, right? Let's be fair. If you're a great CEO, you have to surround yourself with people who fill you out in complementary ways that are better than you. So you got to learn how to take that ego that we've all been sort of trained competitively, to groom and pull it back. So you've got to figure out, and then you have to have, once you bring those people in, your work's not done. You have to, in that curation, have a track record of, think about a museum. I bring in a Van Gogh. How do I highlight the Van Gogh? How do I make sure everybody gets to see the Van Gogh? It's the same with great people. You really want to make sure that you have a mindset of service and how you can serve them in their careers and in their goals. And then that sort of the last C is, and this one is tough. I think for me, it was the hardest of all. And it's your colleague relationships. So it's very interesting. People think, and I think in the past this was true, you'd get to the highest level of an organization by, all elbows, just knocking people out of the way, right? Uber competitive, win, lose, just that mindset. And really what I found is you have got to really win over your colleagues, right? So when I was a CMO, my hardest thing was going in and being able to get my colleagues on board with what I wanted to do, and I needed to get on board with what they wanted to do. So I always laugh. People are like, I have a degree in political science, and I have a master's degree in that as well. And they're like, ugh, politics, yuck, and how does that relate to business? This is where the political acumen really comes in, and not in a sleazy way, because I hate what politics have become, that word, but it's really all about the intersection of where our needs and our wants meet, right? What can I give you, and how can you collaborate to give me what I need, and we work together. Rising tide lifts all boats.
Denise, what you do, I fully support. I'm the proud father of 2 adult daughters. One is going into more of a scientific type of, pursuing her PhD. My oldest daughter is a programmer running a team, doing very well professionally, and I want what is best for them. The thing I look at, we still are in a transitional phase right now where we're still doing the traditional old school business models.
Oh, yes.
The pandemic changed a lot. It did a remote working. It really forced businesses to do a lot of adapting and changing into what I would call more of the future business self. That's something that we as a world need to adopt and be able to pursue and try to break away from that old thought, that old process, and pursue these new business models, which, to your point, would focus on getting the percentage of women executives, and balancing things out, picking the teams, based on people's qualities, their characters, their abilities. And to your point, we need to get away from the mindset of it being like competitive sports when we work in business. And then the other mindset is, I'm the boss. I need to be the smartest person in the room. Well, sometimes, to your point that you just mentioned earlier, being the smartest person in the room is surrounding yourself with highly capable and competent people that can get the job done, many of which they don't want to be the boss, but they do want to make themselves successful, and they want to make their company or their organization successful. So, that's kind of where I'm at. And I think this is a great opportunity now, coming post-pandemic, to really start to embrace these changes and make them happen.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that
Yes.
we have to take action, though. And that's what, I like to say that my performance coaching company, Femi is the name of it, is really all about, performance coaching for a new era in leadership. We're getting away from that command and control idea. Why should I listen to what you say? Well, because I'm your boss and I have a title and I make more. That's gone by the wayside. That's not enough for people nowadays. If you think about our workforce, the vast majority of us are knowledge workers, right? At least in a lot of the careers we're talking about here. And you got to work a little harder for a knowledge worker to convince them to follow you, right? And that's where we get into, I think softer skills of leadership, which end up being, the tangibles, right? The really important stuff. One thing I want to say to you, Jim, because you said something I thought was really interesting. You talked about that sports mentality. What I like to liken it to is less of an individual sport, right? So if I think about all the individual sports out there, where it's like me on you, one-on-one, a lot of aggression in that. It's more about a true team sport. And I think we've all played, or a lot of us, I know, team sports. I was a D1 athlete. And, from my perspective, there were times when I was the superstar, and there were a lot of times when I followed. And there's a cadence of following and leading that I think team sports gets at really well, along with a lot of other group activities.
Yeah.
Absolutely, because it's collaboration. And there was one company, a tennis company, that I did some coaching with, and they were having issues with getting salespeople that actually worked as a team. Yeah. And as we were talking, the CEO said, well, we want everyone to have played tennis, to be a tennis player. And I looked at him and I said, have you considered any other sports? And he said, no. Really? They said, first, most often athletes can move from one sport to another sport. Yeah. They have that ability to do so. I said, so keep that in mind to him. And I said, second, tennis, unless you're playing doubles, is an individual sport. You want your salespeople to be team players, yet you are contradicting yourself because you're saying that you only want tennis players. I said, look at other sports, soccer. So, especially because tennis is so much about footwork, so is soccer. Look for soccer players because they can easily adapt, or baseball players. So it was interesting. And afterwards, he was like, I never thought about it. But going back to the sports analogy, it's the team, making it a team. Collaboration.
And I think that's brilliant that you came up with that for your client. It's one thing I like to get to talk about when I talk about that too, is diversity of perspective. So you bring in these folks that don't come from your sport or your industry. We all get pretty myopic. And when we get myopic, we stop innovating. So one of the things I like to think about, people will say to me who aren't big diversity proponents, they'll be like, you just want to do that to feel good. You want it to be this, we are the world. It's a little polarized right now. And from my perspective, I want it to be that I want different perspectives in the room so we can innovate more, and we can make more money, and we can be more profitable. That's what I'm looking for. And one of the greatest examples is cosmetics, right? If you're a woman and you think about 30 years ago, right? 35, right? I was a teenager. And, we're buying foundation and there were like 3 shades, right?
Right.
And then you see people of color starting to work in that industry. And now you've got hundreds of shades, right? And you've got so much innovation. Mm-hmm. You wouldn't have had that if you wouldn't have brought those people in. So I just think that's how you make money.
Absolutely. What a great point too there. with that. So thank you, Dr. Rhonda, for your comments there. And we have people from New York. Looks like we have
Chicago,
Arizona, Chicago. So thank you for joining us today. So and going back to the diversity too, the last thing I want on my team is someone else who's like me. You know, the first we would never be logical, because we would be coming up with ideas all the time and there wouldn't be anything that was implemented. Right. But whenever I had worked for a museum locally, and I managed 4 departments. And the last thing I wanted was the directors of those 4 departments to be like me. So without it, you know, we lose that, as you were saying, we lose that ability to be innovative. We lose that ability to learn something new, to discover something new.
We do. And I think, you know, what's tough about a lot of corporations right now and businesses is it's an echo chamber. If everybody the same is there, right? It's the old allegory of the cave that you read about back in junior high, you know, and it's this echo chamber, and we're all saying the same things. And nobody's challenging. We've all been in boardrooms or executive rooms where nobody challenges. I always say that the worst thing that can happen if I'm in a room and I'm talking to people, you know, people I'm comfortable with, they're supposed to be comfortable with me. If they don't say anything, if they don't have any feedback, something's wrong. Like I'm creating the wrong environment, because I thrive off of people that push back on me. Like I have a CFO that I've kind of taken to a couple roles with me, and he tortures me, and in all the right ways. And I love that. You know, he makes me better.
We have a couple of comments here. Jim, can you pop up Ben's comment here?
Yeah, with DEI.
Yes. So, and Ben is one of my colleagues, actually in one of my mastermind groups. So, right, it has to be for the good of the business. Absolutely. And I'm going to also say, we also have to take a chance. We have to take a risk. When I went into the building and construction industry, I didn't know anything about that industry. And I was one of very few people there was one other person they hired that didn't have that background experience. Yet I ended up being one of their top sellers, selling 3 times a year my sales quota. So they took a risk. So sometimes we do have to take a risk, but Ben, agree, we do need to think about what is great for our business.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think you're right about risk. I mean, you also see that not only from a diversity perspective, but straight diversity when we talk about, you know, people of color, women, et cetera, but there's also diversity of industry. So a lot of times you'll see, this is my pet peeve on job descriptions, you know, they'll say, we want this person who has a million different skills and traits, and they want it 100%. And then they'll say, classic case of been there, done that. And I think that is the worst phrase for hiring, because I don't want somebody who's been there, done that. This is different. It's new. I don't know. I want something a little more exciting and innovative.
And they can lose their exactly. You know, they can lose that whatever that spark is, that zing.
The spark. Yeah. I agree.
Definitely. So I wanted to go back to, you had talked about a number of things in the beginning when we were talking about cracking the code. So with it, because you were talking about managing people, curating, you know, teams. So is it too late? So I'm thinking about it. We need to train people at the bottom level so that they're able to do that as they're climbing up and as they're moving into positions, rather than going back to that old, you know, Peter principle. All of a sudden you're in a position that you are in this position, but you're not trained for it because we haven't taught you what to do on the way up. Does that make sense?
Makes absolute sense. And I think if we start early with folks, and that goes to, I'm a big believer in a developmental organization, like by design. So an organization that, you know, actually does training, and not BS training. We've all been to those organizations, right? Yes. But really brings you in, coaches you. That's one of the things, you know, when I started to look at, you know, when I left, you know, corporate America, I left being a CEO, I was like, okay, what do I want to do? I love coaching people and I'm good at it. Like there is nothing that makes me happier than getting off a call with somebody who's struggling, and being able to impact their life and turn them around. So we need more people like me in business, right? We need more people who that's the best manager. That's the best leader, is the one that says, Denise, you seem to struggle a little bit with, being coachable or being self-aware or any of these things that are so critical. So it's about being intentional.
Coachable. Oh my goodness. You hit that. How many times have we come across someone who isn't coachable, even in day-to-day life? But that is someone who is coachable, I believe, opens the door for so many more opportunities.
Absolutely. It's funny. My husband is a former professional athlete, hockey player, and he's probably the most coachable person I have ever met. And what's really cool about him is he can pick up a new sport ridiculously quick, just because he's open. And it's more about, when you think about what makes you coachable, you are dying to get better and you will pretty much do anything, including putting your ego aside, opening your ears, and take the feedback. I mean, it feels hard. It feels like criticism and it takes time to get that, but it's all about listening and open-mindedness. If I could teach those two things, or if I could gift people with that at birth, those are the two qualities.
The other thing with coachability, I believe, I'm an older generation. I'm going to be 56 in May. So I'm very coachable. I can be very flexible. I like to listen. I like to communicate. I think that gives me an ability with the youngest generation that's coming into the professional world, where I'm not so fixed into old thought and the way things that were done back in the 70s, 80s, and 90s. And so that coachability is something that needs to be in everybody in a company or organization, because if you don't have that ability to be coachable, it's tough to be a team player. The other thing is, you're probably not going to interact very well with the younger generation that's coming in, because, what I found with the youngest generation coming in, they want to be involved. Now, they actually, in most cases, want to be involved in the decision process too, which I think is kind of great, because that's the only way they're going to learn it, versus, no, you're too young in your career. Just do your job, be quiet, and I'll make the decisions because I'm the big boy or whoever. That coachability is so critical, I believe.
I totally agree.
Oh,
it's really,
definitely.
You're moving from being more punitive to being more supportive.
Yes,
right.
Definitely. There. And with it, the coachable, the adaptability you had mentioned, also improvise. Being able to improvise. We're not handed everything we need at that moment. When we're able to look at what we have and what we can create with what we have, being able to improvise, I think that also helps you on your way to that C-suite.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you're right. And I think what comes along with that is instinct. So, and MJ, I'm sure for both of you, I mean, we're all at about the same career stage. I think that you get really good at that, right? As you age and as you have done more, you have more, call it wisdom, but how good are you at reading people? So it's funny. I always like to figure out, how do people learn? Some people learn with words and visuals. Some people learn through hearing. Some people are kinesthetic and they have to learn through motion and movement. But I think that is, you got to figure that out, right? And how can you approach somebody with what they need to learn without crushing their spirit? That's the art.
Yeah, Rhonda says some dogs don't want to learn new tricks.
Those dogs have to go. They have to go. In my organization, we try and we love a turnaround, but they got to go. She's right.
Yes. Oh my goodness. Hire the person who's 80% of what you need. Really give them the opportunity. Good one, Patricia. Yes, definitely.
One of the founders of, I want to say it's the Carolina Panthers. That is sort of his motto, is he hires people who aren't quite ready, but they're almost ready. And he feels like they're going to stretch and try and strive for that extra 20% that Patricia notes.
Oh, that one of our Pittsburgh pro players ended up there as an assistant coach. Yes. So, yes. So with it, so we're talking about, so when we think about managing people too, That's another skill that we can learn and improve before we ever start hitting that C level. So when we're managing people, do you have a tip or two that you can share to help with managing people?
I do. I think you want to stay close, but not too close. And this goes back with curating wonderful people. I like to hire the best people out there. And then I, for the most part, get out of their way. Doesn't mean I'm never there, but it means that, they know how to get me. They know how to reach me. They know they can always come to me and the door, proverbially is open. But I like to get out of their way. I stay close. Like I'll be honest with my direct reports. I love a one-on-one for 30 minutes every week. It's not going to break the bank on time management, but at least it gives them the opportunity behind a closed door to say, hey, Denise, and I'll say, what are you struggling with? What can I help you with? I think the other piece is, and I came late to this, don't always assume the worst of people. And I'll give a really great example of what you manage, right? This goes back to that mindset shift. And I had to make it from being more punitive, because that's what we're taught bosses do, right? We don't want to be bosses. We want to be leaders, right? But a boss is punitive. A manager is supportive. So I had an employee not too long ago who just kind of disappeared for a day. And it was really out of character. And we had some things going on. And we were slackers. We were on Slack, and I couldn't get a hold of her. And then I finally talked to her the next day. And instead of being, how you're like, oh my gosh, where did this person go? And I'm not going to say I didn't feel that way. I felt that way. But after I had given myself the chance to kind of like calm myself, I was like, hey, is something going on with you that I need to know about? And how can I help you? I just made really sure that I said, this is not a bad conversation. This is me as a human saying to you, what's going on? And if I got to take some work off your plate so you can get through it. And she did. She had something major going on in her personal life. And it kind of opened up a release valve in our relationship. And it makes it a little bit more trusting.
And I love the fact that you were doing those one-on-ones, because it allows you the opportunity to find out if somebody's having a struggle before it gets out of control, or if they're really having a struggle with someone else, or a challenge with what they're doing, or they need someone to listen like you did at that point.
Absolutely. And she was such a rock star employee. I'm sure she still is, for somebody else, but, I didn't want to lose her, and I'm like, gosh, what can I do for you? So again, I think what we're going for, and I always like to think of the Steelers. I have to throw a gratuitous Steeler reference in here. The Steelers back in the day, and I think now with Tomlin, very good at creating team cohesion. If you look at the best Super Bowl teams, right? And the tightness that Chuck Noll, that Bill Cowher was able to create, that's magical, So that comes from trust, trust and teamwork.
Definitely. So thank you, Patricia, for that shout out there. I wanted to, Jim, can you bring up Norma's comment?
Oh, yes.
The coaching, how it is respected. I agree there, Norma. Not everyone has had the same type of coaching experience, and that in the delivery, definitely. Because there are times where instead of coaching, it is more consulting. So it really depends upon where you are and what company it is.
And I think not everybody wants the best for you. I don't want to say this, but there are times when I'm very coachable, not as coachable as my husband, but I'm pretty darn coachable. And so I fell into the trap years ago when I was more junior, where I'd take everybody's coaching, and as an older person, I'm like, I don't think they always have my best interest at heart. So you do kind of have to discern depending on your culture.
You do. I had a GM when I worked for the builder. I had a GM who took me out on a site once to show me the trusses, because I wasn't getting it, and I would make changes in a diagram in a blueprint that really didn't work. But he went out and walked me through, and I have to say, he has since passed, but oh my goodness, he was the best at being able to take someone who didn't know anything about the industry. And I'll tell you how bad it was. When third interview, they asked me if I knew what headers and footers were. And I said, yes. I was thinking of a Word document because I have a writing background. And first day on the job, I realized it wasn't. So, But and we do have to be, I was coachable too. So that made a difference. He was a great coach and I was coachable. So by the time I left that company, I was a rock star. I knew what was happening.
Great coaches, they see us, right?
Yes.
He saw your potential. He saw what you needed to excel, and he knew how to give it. And that's pretty cool.
And it's a two-way street there.
It is.
It has to go both ways. So when we're on our way to the C-suite, we need to think about that. And when we're in it, we need to think about what it was like when we were coming up.
Exactly.
So we're coming close to our time here. So there's one thing you had mentioned about when we were talking prior, managing peers going sideways. So could you just touch on that for a minute or so?
So they're the hardest relationships. So think about, you have three types of relationships when you're in an organization. You've got the people who report to you. I'm saying once you've got a team and you're moving up the ladder, you got the people who report to you, you got the people who are at your level, and you have your boss and the people above you. People are typically really terrific at managing their people. And when I say terrific, at least they get it intellectually. They know what it's supposed to be, right? They're really, that you get pretty adept as you move up the ladder, because otherwise you don't move, at managing above, right? Managing your boss. And I always love when people are like, I shouldn't have to manage my boss, but you do. That's life, right? And that's how it works. But the really hard ones are the people who are at your level. So let's say, I'm a CMO. I've got a CFO, a COO, I've got all these peers, a chief revenue officer at my level. We all roughly have equal power. And in some ways, we might have like one guy, the CRO, brings in the revenue. He has more power. So to me, it's always been, there are the people you get along with and you just instantly mesh with them. The ones you got to work really hard on are the people you don't. Great example, when I was at the Outdoor Channel, which is a hunting and fishing network, I had this guy who was the chief revenue officer, and we just were like oil and water. And I was young in my career. I was a new executive, and I just was like individual sport player, banging heads with him all the time. It was terrible for our teams. It was terrible for the organization. Yeah. And finally, I got exhausted with it. It felt bad. It just felt really terrible. And I know it did for him too. And I finally said to him, can we go out to lunch and start again, please, as humans? And we went to this really great winery. I was in Southern California, sat outside and had a real heart-to-heart, and became really great allies after that. And don't get me wrong, we had our ups and our downs. It wasn't magical, but there's no way I could have stayed at that organization, and I got promoted a couple times after that, if I didn't win him over. So you just got to do the work.
Oh my goodness, I love that. Don't you love that, Jim? Like that was just, let's start over. Let's go to lunch. And anytime I found, whenever I had a challenging customer, anytime I offered food or drink, it actually settles people. It can calm someone. Yeah. And it's hard to actually get into an argument too whenever you're eating and drinking.
In a public place.
Yes, in a public place.
Yeah.
So, all right. Do you have a last thought that you would like to share with our audience?
I think for me, it's just, you nailed it. These C-suite traits are traits that you can start with, right? So you can start more junior in your career, you can take them with you. So, as you work through, your career, think about those 3 C's: change, colleagues, and curating great talent. And obviously, I'd love if folks would follow me on LinkedIn. And I've also got my website, which is themyllc.com. So if you know anybody who is an executive and looking to step up, that would be the place.
And could you spell that? Can you spell out your website?
Absolutely. It's themyllc.com.
Okay. And is there a meaning behind the name of your website?
Yeah. So I was a big Wonder Woman nerd when I was a kid, and my mom was kind of my real life Wonder Woman. So Wonder Woman comes from a mythical island of all women called Themyscira. So I named it Themi for short.
Oh, I love that. All right. And Jim, just a quick sentence on how people can get a hold of you.
Yeah, the best way for me is just to check out my broadcast every Wednesday. It's called Build Out. It broadcasts here on LinkedIn and other social platforms. But appreciate everybody. Give it a check out. And you can search my name on LinkedIn as James Kunkel, Kunkle.
And I'm going to add one last tip to this is one of the things to think about whenever you are, whether you're being coached or coaching someone or leading a team, managing a team, is think about the energy. The energy when we're in a relationship that isn't a good one, it really drains your energy. So if you find your energy isn't where it needs to be, take a look at what could be causing that issue. So when we are in a great place leading or being led, it's the energy is good. So think about that. All right. And I am MJ Calloway, and you can see us every week here at noon on Thursdays at noon Eastern Standard Time. And you can also follow me on LinkedIn, and my website is mjcalloway.com. So until next time, I do want to say thank you to I want to say thank you to my co-hosts, and thank you, Denise. Wonderful conversation.
Thank you both.
Until next time, have a bounce up day.